to Farm Here Daily, a field-forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Here Daily, dry trends continue in Iowa. State Climatologist Justin Glisan joins us to talk about that as well as expectations for the rest of harvest. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at FieldForwardPod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Here Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, going to take a look at the weather over the last month or so and maybe a peek into the future weather events expected with Dr. Justin Glisan, the State Climatologist of Iowa. Justin, thanks so much again for joining us on Farm Here Daily. Always good to talk to you. And let's take a look at that September month and what was the trends? It felt, I'm going to take a guess because to me it felt warmer and drier than usual.
You got it. And always nice to be back with you, David. So yes, warm and dry was the theme for September. You look at much of eastern Iowa, we had precipitation deficits on the order of 2 to 4 inches. So we are entering the driest part of the year as we get late fall into winter. So it doesn't take a lot to be above or below average. And then you look across portions of western in north central Iowa. That's really where we only saw above average rainfall, and it's very sporadic pockets. So yes, drier than average. If you look at all the stations across the state and you take the preliminary numbers, we're about 1.7 inches of rainfall, and that's almost 1 3/4 inch below average. So about 50% of what we normally would see. Also, as you mentioned, warm. We were about 3.5 degrees above average. So you look at 153 years of records, near the top 25th warmest and driest September on record. But as a reminder to your listeners, last September was the driest and 22nd warmest on record. So over the last 2 years, we've seen kind of a theme come out with warm and dry Septembers, but not as warm and dry as last September.
That honestly surprises me a little bit because it felt like it was still summer last month. It felt like it was still summer in September, and that obviously warmer than usual, but not the warmest. When was the warmest September, out of curiosity?
I probably have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head with 153 years of records. But what I will say to your point about how warm it felt, with it being so dry and with lower dew points, we actually cooled off appreciably at night. So we were near normal in terms of those overnight lows. So we did cool off, but we warmed up pretty much during the day. And, you look at several weeks in September, we were anywhere from 4 to 6 degrees above average if you look at the NASS reporting period. Just this last week, the first full week of October, we've been anywhere from 12 to 16 degrees above average before this cold front came through earlier this week and really dropped temperatures to where they should be this time of year. So, as we're sitting right now, it's about 68 degrees outside, right where we should be for where we are. But you look at the end of August through September, particularly warm conditions, and that gives you a stagnant storm track. We don't get a lot of rainfall, less cloud cover, lots of sunny days, lots of dusty sunny days with the combines rolling as well. So warming up during the day, but also, interestingly enough, cooling off at night.
Very interesting. I guess the segue into warmer and drier is, how has harvest then progressed with the weather in mind? Has the field situation continued to be in relatively good conditions amid that weather?
Yep. So we, recently over the last 2 days, we've had widespread rainfall across the state, particularly southwestern Iowa. We had anywhere from 1.5 to 3 inches in spots. So stations that receive less rainfall, it's enough to knock the dust out of the air. It's enough to keep combines out of the fields for, an hour or two. Soil profiles, particularly in southern and eastern Iowa, are relatively dry, so there's plenty of infiltration capacity. So we saw this last fall as well. Timely rainfalls came, but we were dry enough where it didn't keep combines out of the field for that a long stretch of time. And we're seeing that again this year. Now, the caveat is, with the federal government shutdown, we're not getting those NASS reporting numbers. So it's kind of anecdotal evidence from farmers and producers, but also our field agronomists across the state. But given the weather that we've had over the last several weeks, harvest is ahead of the 5-year average, and it's probably going to be rapid over the next few days and few weeks. On the flip side of that, we are seeing in the outlooks, and I don't want to get ahead of you when you're questioning, but we are seeing a wetter signal kind of redevelop towards the middle of October. But again, driest part of the year as we're entering, doesn't take a lot to be above average.
I will get to that as a further question later down the line, but I think it touches on another point that I would be interested in learning a bit about right now. We don't have those NASS reports at the moment. What type of information are we still able to get at the moment from a Iowa climatology standpoint to keep folks here informed?
Sure. So I still issue my weekly weather summary as Iowa code stipulates. So we're getting the average temperature, precipitation totals across the state, all of those numbers that the National Weather Service or the Midwestern Regional Climate Center provides. We have evidence of soil moisture profiles, how wet or dry they are from different products. The Climate Prediction Center's leaky bucket model, NASA's SPORT remote sensed satellite can give us an idea on soil moisture and the trend that we're seeing, whether we're drying out or saturating with these rainfalls that we've seen recently. So we can get the data, here or there. You have to know where you're looking. Whereas with the NASS statistics, it's all packaged in a nice report on Monday afternoon. So we do really lose out when government does shut down.
Let's take a look at, once again, before we get into kind of future expectations, let's take a look at the soil moisture side of Iowa, because this is now, I believe, the third month in a row we've had of drier than normal months. How is Iowa doing from the standpoint of moisture levels in the soil? Are we facing drought conditions?
Yes, we are. Not drought per se, but abnormally dry conditions. And we're seeing that expand across southern and eastern Iowa, and then a little pocket of northwestern Iowa. So when we see that D0 category on the drought monitor depiction on Thursday, that's reflective more of 30 to 60 day precipitation deficits. Now, we're still coming out of the sixth wettest summer on record, the second wettest July on record. So we do have banked soil moisture deep down in the profile. So if you were to look at a soil moisture map from the NASA SPORT satellite, the driest conditions that we're looking at are in the northwest corner and in the southeast corner. Looking at 100 years of data, we look at percentiles. So the darker the red on the map, the drier the conditions are for this time of year. So you're looking at the 20th percentile or below, or the top 20 driest soil profiles for this time of year. Now, if you were to look at that soil moisture map this time last year, looks a lot drier last year than it does this year. So we have banked soil moisture. We're near normal across, I would say, probably 65% of the state. But with the recent warmth and drying trend, that's where we start to extract more soil moisture. Luckily, it hasn't been too windy. Wind does a good job of extracting at least topsoil moisture. And if you look at topsoil, that's where we see the driest within the profile. And that just makes sense given the sunny days that we've had, the low dew points, low relative humidity, above average temperatures. Those are the ingredients that you need to develop an atmospheric thirst, and that's where you start to extract that topsoil moisture. So if I were to put on my, take out my crystal ball and look at NASS numbers, I would think that those topsoil numbers would look worse than they did last week or the week before.
I'm glad you pointed that out because maybe that is also a clue as to why September felt much warmer than usual, is because it wasn't as windy and we weren't getting as much of a reprieve from the heat that you may typically have in August and July that normally has fewer winds in the first place. So not having as much wind. Is that a reasonable conclusion or hypothesis?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense in terms of, when you got those really sunny days out there, and the heat is out there in when you're outside doing field work or riding in the buddy seat. Yeah, it's going to feel warmer if you don't have a breeze. And same thing this summer. We didn't really have a lot of wind. We had lots of thunderstorms in late June and July, not a lot of steering flow. So you would have thunderstorms pop up, rain out over the same part of the state, and then you would get these higher precipitation totals. So uh, April is our windiest month climatologically. August is our least windy month climatologically, or one of the least windy. But as we move into the transition seasons, as we're moving from the warm season to cold season or vice versa, those shoulder seasons are where we start to see bigger temperature gradients. And when you have larger temperature gradients, that's where you start to see windier conditions. We've been stuck in a stagnant cycle of warm temperatures, so not a tight gradient to produce winds, and here we are.
Justin, let's take a look ahead at the moment. But first, let's establish the climatological situation we're in. What is the telekinetic pattern at the moment that is most likely trending right now?
We are currently in what's called ENSO neutral. So ENSO, again, is the El Nino Southern Oscillation, a multi-year climate pattern that sets up in the Pacific. El Nino is the warm phase, or warmer sea surface temperatures in the eastern equatorial Pacific. La Nina is the cold phase, or colder temperatures. When you have colder temperatures in the eastern Pacific, it sets up a high pressure system basically in the Gulf of Alaska, and it deviates the jet stream over the United States. So that's why we call it a teleconnection. Behavior several thousand miles away can impact our storm track here in Iowa. Now, we're looking at a 71% chance of a transition to a weak La Nina in the October, November, December timeframe. And when we look at weak La Ninas in late fall into early winter, going back to 2000, we generally see warmer temperatures, but also drier conditions across much of the ag belt. Now, again, the caveat here is we're getting into the driest part of the year, so it doesn't take a lot to be drier than normal or wetter than normal. But if we hew to the thematic behavior that we've seen with weak La Ninas in fall, warmer temperatures, again, as I mentioned, but also something interesting in winter if the La Nina hangs around. We generally see, if it's a weak La Nina, more snowfall across the state, anywhere from 4 to 6 inches above average. Whereas if we have a strong La Nina, which is colder sea surface temperatures, we actually see less snowfall. So again, those oceanic temperatures impact the temperature gradient, the speed of the jet stream, and where it sets up over the northern hemisphere. And that's why as we move into winter, knowing the phase and the strength of whether it's El Nino or La Nina does give us more robustness in the forecast and outlook models.
There's a lot you said there, but something that really stuck out was a continuation, potentially, if it translates into La Nina, of warmer and drier temperatures. That is more of the more uncertain future models here later on. What about just the next 2 weeks? If we're taking a look at the next week or two in terms of harvest as we get closer to mid-October, what are the current trends as we are still ENSO neutral?
Sure. So you look across the Corn Belt, we are seeing above average potential for warmer temperatures. So it's looking like we're going to stay warm. And again, I think that bias is more towards the daytime high temperatures versus the overnight low temperatures, just given the drier air masses that have come through. If you're looking on the rainfall side of things, and another interesting thing I'll mention, since I number crunch as a nerd, we've only had one station in the state hit 32 degrees, and that was Stanley, and that was several weeks ago. So we haven't seen a widespread frost or freeze event yet here in the state of Iowa. Now we've seen colder temperatures north of us, of course, in Minnesota and the Dakotas, but we really haven't seen that first frost or freeze. It's not going to impact corn or beans because everything's mature and ready to harvest. But looking at the forecast models, it's looking like potentially we could start to see those colder temperatures develop in the next several days. But on the rainfall side of things, we do see a slight lean from the central to western corn belt for wetter conditions potentially through the middle to third week of October.
Justin, what would be the number one thing you're watching for then outside of forecasts, just looking at models, watching for trends? What would be something you are interested in learning more about or waiting for as we approach this October and this harvest?
How much soil moisture we can bank for the next growing season. That's always in the forefront of my mind in fall this time of year. Let's get harvested and then let's turn the faucet on and get some moisture into the soil profiles for a few reasons. Number one, wetter soils don't freeze as deep or as fast. This has implications on melt in late winter, early spring. If you don't have a deep frost depth, and let's say we have a snowpack on the ground, we're going to infiltrate that moisture better than if we do have a deeper frost depth. You get a rainfall event or you get a snow melt event, that moisture is going to run off into the streams. It's not going to infiltrate into the profiles. We'd much rather have it in the profile than running off. Also, given that we've seen an expansion of D0 conditions across southern and northwestern Iowa, those are the two parts of the state that have missed out on regular rainfalls over the last several weeks. In concert with these warmer temperatures, that exacerbates those drier conditions, and that's where we see, probably on the drought monitor depiction this Thursday, a continued expansion of D0 conditions. If you look at the seasonal drought outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, there's a little corner of southeastern Iowa that's looking like it will develop D1 conditions if we stay dry and warm. And if we do develop a weak La Nina, if we do see the seasonal outlooks, which are showing warmer temperatures, not a clear signal on precipitation, we could see continued expansion of D0 or perhaps D1 as we enter wintertime. So what I would like to see, soil moisture replenishment and a snowpack this winter. We really didn't have a snowpack last winter, the fourth least amount of snow for the state in 138 years of records.
Dr. Justin Glisan is the state climatologist of Iowa. Justin, as usual, really appreciate your time and analysis on Farm Here Daily.
Thanks, David.
This is Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.